We're all set.
Please,
first of all, call the meeting to order and please rise to the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome our viewing audience this evening. Maybe we can have a quick meeting. Every time I say that, though, we get bogged down. Okay, the first item on our agenda is the minutes of June 21st. Oh, by the way, Steve O'Leary will not be here this evening, so we're going to move on. Minutes of June 21st, 2010, regular and executive sessions. Mr. Prisco.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the June 21st, 2010 regular session minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the June 21st, 2010 executive session minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Any comments or all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We have the July 1st, 2010 emergency meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the July 1st, 2010 emergency meeting minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. And
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the July 6th, 2010 regular session minutes as written.
Second.
motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. And lastly, executive session, July 6th. Mr. Prisco.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the July 6th, 2010 executive session minutes as written.
Motion by Mr. Prisco, second by Mr. Delaney. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Correspondence, pass the yellow sheets down if there's anything you want. If you want to look at something quickly, it's in the chairman's folder here. Doesn't look like anyone's here for public comment. The ADA proclamation.
Mr.
This
Chairman,
is an annual event. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I move to proclaim July 26th, 2010 as Spirit of the 20th Anniversary of the Americans with Disability Act and read the act attached proclamation.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Any discussion? Just so everybody knows, this is usually an annual event. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. I'll read the proclamation.
You can sign at the bottom.
I, Robert Messeri, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen of North Reading, Massachusetts, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the people of North Reading as an elected official, do hereby proclaim July 26, 2010 as the spirit of the 20th anniversary of the American with Disabilities Act, ADA. I urge all citizens of North Reading, Massachusetts, its community leaders, business and government officials, to celebrate the contributions that people with disabilities have made and continue to make. As Chairman of the Board of Selectmen of North Reading, we renew our commitment to upholding the non-discrimination principles of the ADA. I urge that all citizens support the efforts of the Independent Living Center of North Shore and Cape Ann, Inc., which is the voice of all persons with disabilities and their families. This proclamation is an acknowledgement of the rights of all persons with disabilities under the ADA and their daily activities, struggles, and triumphs here in North Reading. Signed by the Board of Selectmen, and I make a note that I'm adding, sorry, I forgot to shut this off. I just make a note that there was a letter missing from acknowledgement of the rights. It said of he rights.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on our agenda. Were you expecting anybody here this evening
For,
the truck exclusion
yes, I'm
discussion?
expecting representatives of the police department and the engineering department to be present, along with several residents who indicated an interest
Okay,
in
so
being here.
we will skip over that, and we will go to
Mr.
appointments. Yes.
I have a question, maybe for the benefit of the audience, when we come across a situation like this, where we have to skip over because we're ahead of schedule. When you have a hearing or a list, or any of our committees, when we have that list in order, are we required to follow that order? With exceptions like this, I understand, but are we required by that?
Well, it depends on if, in the case of something that's published or a specific time for review
Yeah.
of guests or certainly a public hearing, we're obligated to have it in that time frame. Anything else, we just follow what's next on the agenda, or we skip something for one reason or another and come back to it. What's your concern?
No, people have asked me if the policy is that if we have, items 1 through 10, do we always go in that order? Or because we have them listed 1 through 10, are we required to go in that order? Unless there's an exception, for example, we're ahead of schedule.
I think I just specified the only reason, I mean, we normally go in an order unless there's a reason to hold up on something, right? And the only exception would be if we've scheduled a public hearing for a specific time, or we've got guests coming in that we've told them to come in at a specific time, we try to keep on that schedule.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Next item on our agenda is appointments of election workers, and I guess we're gonna wait for that too, is Mrs.
No,
Stats?
Mrs. Stats will not be with us this
Okay.
evening. You have a copy of her communication, together with a copy of the applicable state law. You'll note that in a recommendation, this annually comes before the board during the summer months, during the month of July or the beginning part of August. The appointments will become effective on September 1st. And the clerk has submitted, or should I say the board of registers have submitted, names of individuals. The recommendation would be to appoint the election officers from the list submitted by the registrars, as recommended by the registrars, or option number 2.
Any discussion? Mike, you're all set?
Mr. Chairman, I move to exercise the following option for appointment of election workers for elections held between September 1st, 2010 through August 31st, 2011. The option I'm recommending is appoint election officers from the list submitted by the registers, as recommended by the registers.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney, and this list is dated June 28, 2010, just to conform with the new laws. This would have to be part of the,
I'm attaching it.
okay. Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. The next item is something that I've asked to discuss. We had a financial planning team meeting last Friday, and we had a review, although I believe it's been updated since then, of our year-end financials, the purpose of which is, one, to kind of get a feeling of where we might be associated with free cash going into this fiscal year. Obviously, for you, Mike, in case you're aware of it, free cash is certified by the Department of Revenue, typically in the September timeframe, just prior to
Okay.
October town meeting. And free cash is the result of the difference between what we've collected and what we've spent. But there's a couple of subtleties which are probably different than business aspects that you've been used to, and that one of them is that, at the end of the fiscal year, it's like the town went away and it starts all, it's a brand-new town.
Mhm.
There is some subtlety, though. Uncollected real estate taxes, that, in other words, if we used, a simple example, if we used, we were gonna collect $20 million in real estate taxes, and we collected 19 million,
Mhm.
right? That doesn't show up as a shortfall in revenue for the year, because the DOR looks at it as it'll eventually turn into a tax lien, it's an asset on the books, but that's the only kind of thing that gets
Right.
carried forward. So we end up with look at it as a bucket that has $1 million, it's $1 million empty.
Mhm.
So now, if we had turned back from unspent budgets and maybe additional collections, $1 million, we'd have zero free cash, because you have to fill the bucket first,
Got it.
okay?
Yep.
So
So-
that's the subtlety.
Yeah, and I have a couple questions on the sheet, but just to make sure I understand, then the
Well,
variance.
Joe is gonna go through it.
I'm gonna run through it,
Okay.
if that helps.
But I just wanted to
That would be
get
great.
that concept.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
good.
And the other
So it's
piece,
free
the
cash.
other piece of it is, for example, unpaid real estate taxes, right?
Yep.
At the end of the year. I mean, some people are late and they get paid in July, but others may, not be. And we've been looking at the trend associated with the economic downturn, right?
Mhm.
Did we get more or less this year than last? And so on and so forth.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're trying to get to. So we have an appreciation and understanding of, what is this current FY 2011 gonna look like? And as we begin the budget process, we may, utilize that information to make further
Yeah.
adjustments in the way we estimate our revenue for FY 2012.
It's good, it makes sense.
You got that, you've already got that, so.
Okay.
Joe?
Do you have the
Yeah,
2010 sheet first?
Sure.
We start off on July 1, we book what we call a preliminary commitment, which is usually half of the previous year's actual commitment. Then when the tax rate is set in November, December, then the difference is the actual commitment. The difference between the preliminary and the new actual is booked, the difference. So it went from 16,033,000 to 16,009,000, right, if you follow this?
Yeah, so you're saying the preliminary commitment for the real estate, you
It's
take
always the half of the year that just
first
ended.
half, which is
Right.
up to July 1st.
Right,
Or is it up to,
No, it's,
Thirty
I think it's by law, we
It's
have to
last
look
year's.
at last year's number.
right.
And we're doing estimated tax bills
yeah,
until we set the tax rate. So the August and November tax bills are estimated,
estimate, okay.
right? And once
Yep.
the tax rate is set, your February and May tax bills have an adjustment, right? It usually goes up.
Right.
And it
So
goes
that's
up
that
more
actual.
than what would be the average 4-month bill to cover the difference of the first 2 months.
See,
that
the
first two
16,033 does not include the 2.5% that you're allowed to increase. It doesn't include new growth.
Mhm.
So when all those are factored in, you needed 16.9 to get to the actual tax rate, which would be like 34,000,009 if you add those two together. So it's gonna be a little more than half, because you've gotta add in those other factors I just mentioned. The 2.5, automatic 2.5% growth,
Yeah.
and then the new growth.
So you're adding those two numbers together?
And that would equal the actual tax levy that we certify in November or December.
Excuse me, you said 34, did you mean 32.9?
32, yes.
Make sure I'm on the same
Yeah.
page.
That's why I asked if he's adding those together, because.
I'm adding
Yeah.
those together.
Okay.
Yeah,
Those
okay.
two
Makes
together should equal what the actual was.
Yep.
So what's the revised and omitted commitment?
There's things that he picked up that didn't make it on the tax bills, that didn't make it on the tax levy. So those were added to the tax levy.
Okay.
So now we get a number, what we committed in real estate was 32,009,092. We have to look at personal property in order to to get a complete picture, and let me run through it, and I'll tell you why you need it. Same thing happens with personal property. You have your preliminary commitment, you have then your actual commitment, and again, we had some revised and omitted. So our personal property committed is $772,000. The total committed is $33,765,000. Now, on the next line, amount per budget projection, those sheets we look at on Friday morning, that has real and personal. So that 33,754 is what we've been using on our revenue projections that we do our budgets on. So you want to compare that to what was committed, and we ended up committed about $10,000 more.
Which is a little bit of a surprise to me, meaning that I would have expected that difference to be bigger. Which means that, you know, in our actual projection, right, we've pretty much nailed it right on the dollar amount.
Right, because we know what 2.5% is going to be.
Yeah.
Then then we update it for the actual new growth.
Mhm.
So we're pretty much in the
Okay.
ballpark. And then these revised and omitted
Mhm.
change it a little bit.
Okay, so that's all well and good. Now, the issue is, what did
What
we
did you
really
collect?
collect?
All right.
Before you do that, though, so just make sure I understand
Yeah.
you correctly. The variance, which you have favorable next to it.
Yeah,
Or does the parentheses mean, if there was parentheses around that $10,900, that would have been a favorable number? So
No,
is that
this is
No,
variance-
no, that's favorable.
That
I
is
probably
favorable,
should, I probably
okay.
should have put parentheses. I'm
That's
saying the
confused me a
favorites,
little bit.
I should have put, the variance is favorable, which means we committed more than we budgeted.
Okay, because when I first read it, I said, oh, we're under 10,000, we
No.
we underspent, we undercollected to over 10,000.
No.
No,
Well,
it's
I-
got nothing to do with it.
Okay,
Nothing to do with collections, but if we collected everything we committed, we would have collected $10,000 more than on the budget.
that's your free cash that you
No,
referred to?
No, no, no.
Stop a minute,
Right.
okay?
Okay,
What he's talking about is what we used in our revenue plan,
Yeah.
okay, which is how the budget is developed,
okay,
was $33,754,100.
okay, so this
What-
number you used,
Right,
That's
that's,
when we did the 2010 budget, which we ended up balancing. This is what we had for total taxes.
that's your budgeted number,
That's what we budgeted, that's what we based the 2010 budget on.
okay.
When everything was all said and done and
Yep.
the tax was levied, we ended up billing $10,000 more.
Okay,
Now, collecting
got
it
it, now I understand.
is a whole nother ballgame.
right. All right,
So
so,
during 2010, we collected $32,581,676. Now, how was that collected? The first three numbers, 05, 07, 08, means we paid out money, and that's why there's brackets around it, that people overpaid.
Money going out.
People,
file for abatements? No,
very few.
yeah.
People could have refinanced their mortgage, and sometimes the mortgage company and the customer both pay the bill, because they don't know because they're in between. So, we end up giving refunds, and that's where that 18,000, 38,000, and 30,000 come in. We gave out more than we collected in those years, because we were all collected, or they went to tax titles. So there were refunds given. 2009, collections, we collected $347,521 of last year's real estate taxes. And I think that's the number Bob is very interested in.
Yeah, and I wanted to see it broken down this way too. I think
Oh, good, so it worked.
it's easier to analyze
Okay.
where we are in terms of trends.
And for 2010, the actual year we're in, we collected $32,320,888. Now, I did the same thing for personal property.
One quick question. That FY 2009, that's that first quarter or final quarter?
That's the year.
347.
The 347, it's what people didn't pay
Throughout the whole year.
all year. It could have been the last quarter. More than likely, it would be the last quarter, because this is collected in 2010 that belonged to, it should have been
2009
collected.
Overall, whether it was last quarter or first quarter
Right.
doesn't make, okay.
But-
Thank you.
So I did the same thing for personal property, and that's, not much happened in fiscal '08 and '09, but the big collection for 2010 was the $755,000. Now, I guess the comparisons, if we committed real estate at 32,992, we collected 32,320,000, and it shows a variance of 671,282.
Joe, as of what date is that collected amount?
As of June 30th, I went and I had 11 months on the books, and I did a month manually. Now, a little bit of more information on the 671. $164,384 of that has been added, what we call subsequent year taxes added to tax title. So the real variance, if we're gonna compare it to '09, should
Explain
be,
that, can you stop and explain that?
yes.
Quiet, please.
There's 671,282.66 can be reduced by 164,384 because they were subsequent years. These people that already had taxes and tax title, and subsequent years automatically go to tax title, and they haven't been recorded on our books. I did this manually.
What's that number again?
The subsequent years added to tax title is 164,384.30, which means the variance now is 506,898. With me?
Repeat that number, please.
We started the 671.
In terms of an asset,
It just,
But
we
in terms
just
of cash
reclassified the
flow-
action. It's
but in terms of-
reclassified.
It's reclassified, right, because
but
one
in
of
terms
the
of
tax
cash
title.
flow,
What was the number again, Joe?
164,384.30 to be exact.
Oh, okay.
so those are property owners that are already in tax title, so their future years' real estate tax bills automatically go into tax title.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was done the end of June. Still has to be updated on our, on the ledger, but it's there manually.
So their FY11 bill, real estate tax bill automatically goes into tax title.
Not until June. This is all done in June. That's why it wasn't recorded. This is all done in June by the treasurer collector.
Now, so the variance, in other words, the variance is what, is the difference between the commitment and the collection of just FY 2010, correct?
Correct,
On
correct.
this page,
That's what we wanted to see.
right, so that, and I wanted to compare that against the variance last year to see which direction we were going in. But I think Sean has pointed out
I think-
there's an error on 2009 in terms of,
I think what you did in 2009, when you compared the committed versus collected, you took the total collected amount and not what was collected for FY 2009 real estate taxes, Joe.
Ah, yes, you're right.
So I think the variance there, the variance is
did you,
813,398.31.
18?
813,000.
Right, so you've got to add back the 425.
What's the total, you've got it?
$813,398.31.
398, okay. So what that says is that there's been an improvement
Right.
in unpaid taxes. There's fewer people
Missing the payment.
that have missed payments.
Right.
Plus, you have to then look at what was collected in the prior years to see, you know, what else is going on. But you have those numbers here.
So it's about 812, Sean? If you add the 425 and the 3,900?
I came up with 813,000.
Yeah, all right, yeah. 'cause it's
398.
It's almost $4,000, okay.
That's the new variance number?
No, that's '09.
Oh,
No
nine.
09
It's the 09 what?
variance number.
Okay.
For '09 only,
Um,
collections versus commitment.
I mean, it went up from 384
Right.
to 813?
Yeah, it's just the way,
I understand.
just the way the math.
That's fine.
Now, of the uncollected taxes,
Subtracted from here, should have taken that number.
Okay, good. Thank you.
unpaid real estate, there are 219 bills,
For
For-
FY '10?
just for FY10.
When you say bills, are you talking about a specific residence or a specific
this is all
bill
of them.
sent to a residence?
There's 219 individual bills for 467,000 that has not been collected.
But you said the variance is 671,000.
Yeah, well, there's refunds, and this is what was printed off today from it's not gonna tie because partial payment and reporting cannot be accurately tied back to the year-to-date or status history payment totals due to possible refunds. This is the other system that prints what they have outstanding.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the treasurer has outstanding.
That's a big, that's, the difference between those, that's a big number.
It is a big
It's a
number.
couple $100,000.
Well, it's 506 to, no, it's.
No, it's, well, 506 if you reduce that subsequent year tax title number.
Right.
But you're working from a $671,000 variance.
Well, not anymore.
But those aren't on here, though. Those subsequent, she's a step ahead. She doesn't include the 164 in here.
Okay.
So you want to compare the 506 to the 467, which is about 39,000. And there's refunds, there's things that,
All right, that brings it closer together.
Yeah, it's 39, it's almost 40 grand.
right, and there's, different, it's basically the refunds that haven't been posted up. Now, there are no big, extremely large taxpayers in here. I mean, the largest bill, I can see there's one for 13,000, there's one for 20,000. The rest of them are just your average tax bill. Now, these don't go to tax title until February. This is how the policy's been here. So in February, if they're not paid, then they will get liened.
And what's our process to get them paid now? I know we're doing something different this year than we've done.
First you advertise, then you do the tax title taking. And that happens in February.
That all.
So-
So we're not doing anything in the meantime.
No, because you give them a little bit, a chance to pay.
So, I guess the $64,000 question, or the $10 million question, whatever you want to call it, is, given this situation, right, which we don't concern ourselves from the point of view, we don't have to make it up in our operating budgets,
Right, we don't.
But it does damage the free cash calculation,
Yes.
which is where we're trying to get to. I don't know if you can get to it tonight, but,
I can give you a ballpark of turnbacks, about 600,000.
okay?
I still need one more month of receipts. I mean, we're on target with our receipts on May. I mean, we hit most of them in May, so in my report to Greg, what we collect in June should put us over.
So I guess, is it fair to ask that we, at our next board meeting, we put this on the agenda and we have this wrapped up?
When will that be, 2 weeks?
It'll be the first Monday in,
Yeah,
well,
August 2nd.
August 2nd.
Yeah, I should have receipts. I mean, Treasurer's is gonna finish up this week with the bank statements, and then the final report comes to the fire department to get uploaded. Yeah, I can see, we have the final receipts by August 2nd, and hopefully the balance sheet
Well,
done.
you've got 2 weeks to,
Yeah, well, they've been working on it. Don't forget, there's some little quirks to iron out with the new system. You know, the refunds don't
Mhm.
post up.
any,
They will eventually when we get the,
I think we need to make that a goal.
it's attainable.
All right, then,
I think it's more of a priority than a goal. I mean, I think we are critical that we need the information
Mhm.
sooner than later. So I'd like to say to really, I mean, I hate to step over you, but I think it's more of a priority. It's gotta get done in advance of August 2nd. We need to have it in advance of August 2nd, because you know what? I don't understand about 50% of what's in front of me. I have a better grasp on it now, but you know what? This was put in my packet tonight, and I tried to understand it without any explanation, and I only got about 50%, and I don't want that to happen again. I'd like to come to the next meeting, have an idea to be able to read it, and then maybe come to the office if I have to ask questions in advance.
Come to the office
Yeah,
this
I'd love
week.
to. I know your people are wonderful. They answer all my questions, but this doesn't work for me coming in and getting this the night of a meeting, and and we are at a critical point. I'd like to make it a priority if we can, to get it done. So if
Well,
you
it
guys
is.
could try to get your, commi-
Our goal is now to close the year.
well,
Get 210 done.
so we're talking somewhere around July 27th, July 28th, cleaned up, wrapped up, and have a report ready for us to look at. So that gives us, 3 days to kind of bleed through it and prepare questions. Is that possible?
Yeah, if things get done this week, like I was told.
well, bring the message back.
Oh, I
We're
will.
expecting it, okay?
It's critical. It really is critical for every town employee and all the people that work hard for this town every day. We have to get it done.
All right, and if you want to come in the meantime.
Absolutely, I plan on, it. Definitely.
One-on-one is a lot
Okay, any
easier.
other questions for Joe?
Big crowd.
No?
Thank you. Wonderful, though. Thank you for pulling.
All right, I guess we have a,
Joe?
You're welcome.
large group here, I assume, here regarding the issue of trucks on Chestnut Street. Maybe we'll start with the police chief. I want to speak from the podium there. Thank you.
Hi, Chief.
Cedar Street, Chestnut Street, Havel Street, Parker Drive area. The town administrator and I, during our last weekly meeting 2 weeks ago, discussed the receipt of a petition signed by 40 residents of the area. And we came up with a draft action plan in which he was gonna take a role, DPW was taking a role, and the police department was gonna take a role. I went back to our department, met with the commanding officer of our traffic division, and asked his traffic team to research some of our more recent records. We've changed computer systems since 2007, so it's difficult to go back historically beyond that period of time. But going back to the operational period of 2008 through August of 2009, it's interesting that we had conducted several selective enforcement efforts in that area. And during the times that the officers were assigned to that location, they did observe multiple trucks traveling in that location, and they only found like 2 or 3 that were going faster than the posted speed limit. But they did recognize the fact that the trucks traveling along that road, particularly along Chestnut Street, were creating a significant amount of noise as they bounced off of obstacles on the road, such as manhole covers or utility covers on the roadway. These efforts went on off and on for a period of time. We also worked with the Department of Public Works. Mike Sorgan was instrumental, and Dave Hanlon, his former boss, in coming up with a doable plan that could, a plan that could reach and achieve some immediate goals, and that was the installation of new curbing and crosswalks in that area, along with the installation of several new signs. There was an inquiry made by the town as to whether trucks could be prohibited, and we found that the town of North Reading did not reach the threshold necessary to implement a ban or exclusion of trucks through that area. And the other interesting thing is I met with Representative Jones about prohibiting the use of Jake brakes in North Reading. And it was Representative Jones' opinion that was illegal. They're there for a reason. They're disturbing, and it would be something that we could not enforce. But based upon our meeting with the town administrator regarding the most recent petition, which was the first time I had actually seen it, was on that particular date. 2 weeks ago, the one that was authored in 2010, our traffic division has come up with an action plan, and one was to establish, one of our objectives was to establish an immediate law enforcement collaborative with the Mass State Police truck team. The town administrator provided me a contact number with a sergeant, I forget what his name is now, Sergeant Fitzgerald, who has now recently been promoted to lieutenant, and he's the commanding officer of that unit. And I got a call, very nice call, from his boss, Major Amadeo, who is the troop commander for Troop A, which he oversees Andover Barracks and the Danvers Barracks, and said that he would like to work with our department in a cooperative venture. And there was an immediate date that was established of this past Friday. And a team of troopers trained by the Department of Transportation, as well as through their own training through the motor vehicle laws, along with their vans that have about $50,000 worth of equipment in the vans, set up operation in the New Street, Chestnut, Cedar Street area. Spent some time there, and then they spent some time on South Main Street. They met at 4 o'clock in the morning. They were up and running by 5 a.m., and they were done by 10 a.m. And they do it that way because they explained to us that it doesn't take very long for truckers to use their communication systems to alert each other that there is an operation underway. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. The next effort we will do is to get some of our officers from our traffic team trained. We actually were trying to schedule our officers this past May to attend the State Police-run truck training team school, which would enhance our ability to enforce Chapter 90 laws with reference to motor vehicle infractions and equipment failures on heavy commercial motor vehicles. However, due to budgetary constraints, we had to put it off, and we are on a list right now, and it's likely we're going to be trained by the state police in August or September of this coming year, of 2010, this year. So that's an important first step. What that training will do, it'll enhance the officer's ability to recognize these particular types of violations. For example, one of the things the state police look for, besides the obvious mounds on the back of a truck that may indicate an overload, is the ballooning of tires, the wobbling of rear axles, and and then your obvious equipment failures. And it teaches them how to, a number of other things, and which is beyond my level of expertise at this point, because I haven't been to the school myself. But that'll enable our officers to enforce Chapter 90 laws versus Chapter 90 and Department of Transportation. We will not have the authority to enforce the DOT laws at this particular level of training, and I'm not sure that we'll ever be able to enforce DOT laws. That will probably likely need the assistance of the state police. The state police truck teams are deployed on a priority and on a need-be basis throughout the state. It was explained to me by Sergeant Romeo that, for example, in the central part of the state, Worcester, Fitchburg, and several of the larger cities, they've got some major problems with trucks. And they get them about once a month going out there. So it's not likely we will see the state police truck team in the town of North Reading at the frequency that we would all like to see them there. But perhaps with that specialized training, we'll at least be able to enforce the Chapter 90 laws more effectively. The next objective on our action plan is it's called Selective Uniform Traffic Patrol. And we would be using regularly scheduled officers on shifts. This would not be an overtime effort for obvious budgetary reasons. And we'll speak to our day sergeants and our early evening sergeants to try to schedule some concentrated enforcement, not just in that area, but we have to also look at to ensure that there isn't disparate treatment amongst the other areas of town that are impacted by heavy commercial trucking, such as Lowell Road, Chestnut Street, Route 62, as well as the area you folks are concerned about. So we'll try to set up selective enforcement as effectively as we can using our regular scheduled officers. The caveat to that is that sometimes you may see an officer sitting there or a team of officers sitting there for an hour or two. Sometimes you may see them there for 5 minutes and then they fall off to respond to another incident. There's another type of patrol called a directed dedicated patrol. And once we get our traffic team trained in truck laws, we will take a look at available overtime and schedule these group of officers to target certain areas around town, specifically looking at heavy commercial vehicles and enforcing the Chapter 90 laws. And our next area is research. We want to specifically, Sergeant Romeo suggested this evening that we contact counsel for the Registry of Motor Vehicles to get a legal opinion as to whether, in fact, we can prohibit jake braking in certain areas of towns. For those of you that don't understand jake braking, in addition to their power-assisted brakes like we have in our cars, a truck driver off a heavy commercial vehicle can flip a switch on his or her dashboard, and that releases the compression in the engine and slows the engine down, and that's that rumbling noise as it's blowing out the high pressure through those, like a pressure cooker. So we're gonna research that and so we can do if there's anything we can alleviate the problem through that kind of enforcement. We're also talking about forming a plan about operator education. I know the town administrator, in our brief discussion about this 2 weeks ago, was sending some letters out to the big three that you folks identified as causing the majority of problems in and around that area. But as our traffic team becomes more proficient in what to look for, we may be able to host a class or two with the police department, invite some of these folks to come in so that they can become aware of our concerns about truck and commercial safety in the town. And then we want to follow up with you folks to find out how we're doing. If there are still problems, and we'll try to address those as they come up. We would really love to see a fully outfitted truck team. However, it's more than likely cost prohibitive in this economy at this time here. The state police vehicle, or vehicles that were used, they were outfitted to the tune of about $60,000 with their tie-ins to the Department of Transportation, to the Registry of Motor Vehicles, and printing out the necessary documents to seize a vehicle and have a vehicle put out of operation and towed from the scene. But I think that we can come down with a scaled-down version of what the state police do, and perhaps meet the needs of the town of North Reading, and then working with the DPW and the results from the TA, maybe we'll have a plan that's in place that'll help mitigate these particular problems. I told you that I would give you a breakdown of the initiative that took place on Friday. It ran from 4 a.m. in the morning to 10 a.m. And there were four troopers, 2 teams, and we had 5 North Reading officers there in observation and also assisting the troopers with traffic. There were 11 large commercial vehicles stopped. Probably 9 of them were stopped in the Cedar Street, New Street, Central Chestnut Street area. One they actually had to pursue over Haverhill Street, stop them down by Pocket Drive and bring them back to where the team was located. And that was an overloaded truck. Of the 11 trucks, 5 were placed out of service for 20 or so violations, safety violations. And they called in Cody's towing out of North Andover and had them hauled out of there. There were 14 driver violations, 72 truck violations, 3 overweight violations, and the state police issued about almost $3,000 worth of fines to those particular drivers. It should be noted that there was no speeding. None of the trucks were stopped for speeding, and it's not that it was probably their lucky day or an anomaly, because I'm sure that we're all sure that there are trucks at speed, but there was none observed in that particular time frame that were going over the posted speed limit. And interestingly, with some of the trucks, I've seen some pictures that were taken at the scene that were in deplorable condition. There was no excessive noise, which struck me as odd, but again, it was one of those days where the stars didn't line up and we didn't quite get what we were looking for on that particular day. We will continue our relationship with the state police. It's nothing but a win-win for us and the town of North Reading. And we will continue, as we have in the past, work with the DPW. We have a great partnership in trying to find some means of mitigation, and along with the town administrator. At this point, if anybody has any questions, the board or the residents of the area, please don't hesitate to ask.
I thought maybe the next step would be for the board to get some input from the residents. Yeah. So the rules will be raise your hand and through the chair, and come up to the podium. The meeting is being televised. Cite your name and address for our recording
Vieta,
secretary.
8 Cedar Street. We want to know if the town would at least meet us someplace and maybe put like a 7 to 7 curfew. Is that possible? So we can at least sleep with our windows open? I don't know if that's...
Mr. Romeo. Oh, I'm sorry, Scott.
Yes,
Scott, tell.
Joe Vito used to be a member in the past. We could not enforce time-restricted roads in the past, for anywhere in the state. That's what Joe's aware of that law as well. We used to have time-restricted roads in town. We couldn't enforce them. They'd actually take the signs down as far as time restrictions.
All right, and then with all these fines...
Mr. Bellicone says some comments.
I think it might be helpful, there's a whole process that's involving enactment of a truck exclusion that's not a simple local decision. the town engineer, I think, might be helpful to maybe respond to a number of your questions and just give a brief presentation in terms of what's involved in that process, if the board would allow it.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems like within the 4 hours that they were there, they racked up $3,000 in fines. And how many infractions? You said 11?
There was 11 vehicles stopped and
11.
72 infractions.
So, yeah, I mean, how about the kids that are gonna be there at 7 o'clock in the morning waiting for their school bus?
No, we understand, but,
Yeah.
you know, there are
Dangerous
certain rules,
intersection, so-
there are certain laws that we have to abide by. Why don't we have our town engineer deliver a little report, might help answer some of your questions.
The process for a truck exclusion involves approval by Mass DOT. It's out of the hands of the town. And Mass DOT requires an engineering report. And within that engineering report, there are, I consider, two key components. The first is a traffic count. Now, in the petition that was submitted to the town, they are looking for a 12-hour exclusion. The report would have to contain a traffic count for the 12-hour period that they were looking for the exclusion. The second key item in a engineering report that would be sent to Mass DOT is a map outlining an alternate truck route would have to be provided. And the options, if Chestnut Street were limited to passenger vehicles and trucks making deliveries, would either send trucks into Reading, and you would need support from the town of Reading to get an exclusion in North Reading, or they'd be redirected towards the intersection of Haverhill Street and Park down by Rias. The proximity of schools, the number of pedestrians during the day at times, I don't think that is a viable alternative. In fairness to the petitioners, the town, to the best of my knowledge, does not have current traffic counts. Neither does Mass DOT. I don't know, maybe the state police did some traffic counts, but my sense is they didn't, if they were only out there for 6 hours, they didn't meet the 12-hour requirement.
Michael, I just want you to address the, there's a threshold or a percentage of traffic that needs to be trucks to meet this requirement. So it's not only a traffic count, but the traffic count needs to validate the fact that there are a certain percentage of trucks that travel across the roadway, therefore warrants an exclusion. Can you address that?
That's correct. The total volume, the number of traffics with a carrying capacity over 2.5 tons has to be between 5% and 8% for Mass DOT to consider a truck exclusion.
Of the entire traffic flow on that road in the given period that the exclusion is requested.
That's correct.
Is the town aware that there's 40-foot gas tankers running through the town all night long, right through that intersection?
I'm not aware of that.
Is the fire department, available to, comment on that?
They're not here.
The fire department's not here this evening.
Well, they're not excluded from driving through there, that's the
These
issue.
are big
Yeah.
40-foot gas tankers trying to take a right-hand turn when you're coming down New Street onto Haverhill Street.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of dangerous, no?
Well, let's,
If you look at the telephone pole that's leaning there, with all the scuff marks up against it, it's only a matter of time before they take the telephone pole down, so they can't kick it out there.
mm-hmm. Now, and typically this is, at what time frames have you
All night
observed
long,
this?
24 hours a day.
Okay?
It's no secret.
Anyone else want to make some comments? Yes, gentlemen, to the podium. He's there for questions.
I'd like to have the podium.
Yes, yes.
Sure. Dave, can I just say something before you get up? One of the issues is New Street is it's an easy turn for the trucks to come in. It's not a 90-degree turn, so they tend to kind of go a little faster to make that turn rather than making it at the blinking yellow light. So maybe if there was not allowed to come in that way, make it only an exit or something.
Yes,
Thanks.
yes, sir.
Nathan Foss, 127 Chestnut Street, North Reading. Thank you, Chief Nolan and Officer Tilton, for the plan. I thought that was well thought out, and the fact that you expedited it in the time that you did, thank you. However, I think we just glossed over the gravity of the situation. You know, we just talked about 11 trucks being stopped in a 5-hour period, 72 violations. 5 were taken out of service. 47% of the trucks passing through our neighborhood in 6 hours were removed from the roads. We have 2 bus stops, a kid's play spot, elementary bus stops that these trucks are driving by. 1 truck was removed from the road or fined because it was overloaded by 10,000 pounds. These trucks weigh anywhere from 52 tons, 35 tons to 52 tons. They're coming through roads that are only 19 feet wide. New Street is 19 feet wide from both white lines. Chestnut Street has maybe 20 feet of width. So these large tractor trailers don't belong in our neighborhood. They're violators. They're coming from Wilmington, all the businesses in Wilmington, to avoid 128 and 93, that intersection. I understand. I drive to Boston. There's a lot of traffic. But that doesn't give them a right to come through our neighborhood and abuse the quiet enjoyment of our homes and our safety. We can't walk our dogs, we can't cross the street, and our children, our elementary school bus stops, these kids are at risk. It's only a matter of time when one of these tires blows on one of these trucks and kills one of our kids. And I just think that, you know, we just glossed over it, gentlemen. You know, 50% violation in 6 hours. The trucks were removed from the roads. What does that tell you? I mean, that's a serious situation. You know, and the reason the state police came is because we called them. So again, I understand there's budgetary constraints. I understand that, you know, we have some issues, but I'm asking the board to allow the chief to, you know, undertake his initiative, approve the budget override through the reserves, and let them get their training.
I don't think the training solves your problem. I think,
Well-
what I'm hearing, we have to go to the state to get the exclusion or
Well-
a 12-hour time
Well,
period.
before we get to an exclusion, we need to work on enforcement. So the chief talked about, you know, he didn't get what he was looking for on last Friday. I think you got exactly what you were looking for. I mean, maybe you didn't stop trucks for speeding. You know, maybe the state didn't get the trucks for speeding, but look what they did get. That's a serious problem, gentlemen. So, you know, the neighborhood's posted. It's a thickly settled neighborhood. It's posted 25. You know, with all due respect to the chief and his staff, these trucks aren't going 25. I've personally clocked them down Chestnut Street and called into the police department with trucks going 50 by my house. They come back empty. They come down Chestnut Street, and they hit the bottom of Chestnut Street at the intersection of Central Street, and they're going 50 miles an hour. Empty cement trucks, tractor trailers. So they are speeding. The Jake brakes, I think there's a bit of, I think there's some confusion on the information. Officer Fitzgerald from the state police, the head of the trucking unit, told me that Jake braking in a residential neighborhood is illegal. So I think we have some different information tonight. I was told by the head of the trucking unit that that's illegal. And I think really that's all I have to say tonight. But I think if you go over the facts of what happened last Friday with the truck enforcement unit, you'll understand that what we're dealing with is much more serious than just, you know, getting some enforcement and, you know, thinking about an exclusion. We have a serious safety issue, and I implore the town to consider the fact that there's playgrounds, there's a park, there's 2 elementary bus stops that these trucks are going by at early hours in the morning. And our neighbors have these children waiting at these bus stops, and it's just a matter of time, gentlemen. So,
Thank you. Chief, in your report, you talk about 11 trucks stopped. In that time frame, how many trucks went by? Was there a count made?
Probably about 30 or 40 trucks.
30 or 40, okay. So over 30% was stopped for one reason or another. Gentleman with his hand up there?
Eddie Wheeler's my name.
Oh, yes, Mr. Wheeler.
I tell you, I'd like to have my money spent on speed bumps. And speed bumps in place with the necessary signage to legalize them. I think our troubles would be over with. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Someone else had a hand up in the back.
Well, can we get a response from the police to see whether
yes.
that can be done? I don't know if that can be done.
If you'll notice, you won't see speed bumps on any public way at all. You see them only on private property. Boston has actually done a study on those, and speed bumps weren't feasible for liability reasons. So speed bumps aren't a viable way for a public way. They cause someone to stop abruptly and accident, vehicle damage, et cetera. So Boston engineers have done a study, get all about that, but it's not, you won't see them on public way.
In Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts.
But in other
Only in private property.
states, they're all over the place. Yes, sir.
At the end of Lowell Street, by Four Corners in Linfield,
Mm-hmm.
there's big signs down there, no jake breaking. So, if they have
Yeah,
signs and
I was
everything-
never under the impression that jake braking, you couldn't prevent jake
Like, is it
braking.
going too fast, right? If they have to use the jake brake to slow down?
that's right.
All right.
Well, I would say that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I had
Yes, sir.
one other thing I wanted to point out, especially, this is really for the chief and Officer Tilton. The post office annex is sending all their trucks and all their contractors through our neighborhood. Obviously, they've been noted as one of the violators.
Yes, what I've heard informally was that the two major sources of trucks were the post office and the cement trucks and
Beneventos?
Beneventos. Now, I don't know if there's others, but those were the two largest contributors to this problem.
Chief said 3.
Well, it's Heffron, Aggregate Industries, Benevento, and there's another heavy industry over there. But there's one thing I want to point out. I personally witnessed this myself. The large 18-wheel trucks are taking a right at Kitty's from the annex. So they're taking a left out of the annex, taking a right on 62 to come through our neighborhood, and they're taking a right from the left-hand lane of 28. That's an illegal turn. You can't cut off the inside lane traffic with an 18-wheeler from the left lane. It's an illegal turn. So it should be
Describe
stopped.
that again, please.
They're taking a right at Kitty's, heading north on
This
28.
is from the post office annex?
Yep, the only way they can take a right is to take it from the left-hand lane, and they're cutting off all the passenger cars. Again, it's just a matter of time before somebody runs into that tractor trailer, goes under it, and somebody gets killed. But that's happening. I've personally witnessed that. It's the only way they can make that turn. If you, it's Melba Trucking. If you put a patrol out there, you'll see them. So, guys, again, this is stuff that's happening right under our noses, and I think, I'm imploring the town to really consider these violators and these abusers, because it's been going on for years, since I've been back in town. I grew up here, but since I've been back in town, and something has to be done about it.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Susan Bean, 124 Chestnut Street. My house is located right on the corner of Chestnut, New, and Cedar, so I probably have the best view of this activity. I wanted to state just some personal observations that I've made and a lot of my neighbors have made. Not only is safety a huge factor, which is, I think, in this case, the biggest factor and the most important factor, but we haven't talked about the fumes. In the months that the windows are open, the fumes have come into our home so strongly that we've actually had to walk around our home thinking that something was wrong with the furnace, and something was on fire, because the fumes were so strong. So that's one thing that we have to acknowledge as well. The vibration of the trucks, not just from this braking, but just from the amount of weight that's in the trucks is so heavy that has cracked the walls in my dining room and has taken off paintings off the wall. So it's just things that other things that we have to talk about and realize the impact. The safety, it's that just from the 4-hour, was it? The 6-hour time frame with all the violations that were placed, it's, as Nate said, almost 50% of the trucks were in violation. So we know that that's a big issue. We all know that it's speeding, although that didn't really come up in that audit. But we also have to think about the trucks that aren't in violation, because they're still causing safety problems for our children. It's going through the bus stop. It's going by the playground that's populated every solitary day. It's going by the ballpark that's used on a regular basis. So it's not only just the violations. So with the training, with some officers, hopefully we can gather that information and prevent some of those trucks. But we also have to realize the trucks that aren't in violation are still carrying heavy loads, are still making a lot of noise, they're still causing fumes in the area, still causing vibrations. And honestly, if they had to stop because of a child or something in the road, they couldn't stop. They absolutely could not stop, even if they wanted to. So being on that corner, I have prevented my children from playing in the front yard because I'm so afraid that there's going to be a skid on a snowy day, on a rainy day, on an icy day that will just come right in front of our house. And that's right across from the schoolyard. The bus stop. So I'd like to see more attention put towards getting the trucks away from that area, not just about the violations, not just about the speeding, but getting them away. We're so close to 93, we're so close to 128. You know, I can't understand why we can't look at putting some of the trucks through that area. So I just want to emphasize that it's not just about the safety, there's other aspects of this, other consequences, and really want to focus on putting the attention towards getting them out of the neighborhood altogether.
Thank you. Yes, sir. Name and address.
Yep, Doug Lab, 130 Chestnut Street. My house is just before hers on the corner there. I had several questions, one I guess to the engineer. If the exclusion doesn't work and the residents of New Street in the area are willing, what about just blocking off the end of New Street, the side that's along Havel? It's now a dead end. They live in a cul-de-sac of their own. Those 3 houses, hers on the corner, and everybody else. The houses that live on Cedar Street would love it because now they don't have to take a blind turn coming out from people that are going to be trying to fly through that turn, because where they're, what's your address?
2 Cedar Street.
2 Cedar Street. That stop sign is 10 feet from the edge of that corner. They have to inch out, which the police will say you can't roll past it. You have to stop at the stop sign, and then you have to proceed once you think it's fine. But you have to almost pull out to pass Mr. Ham's house to see what's coming down. You get clocked half the time for the cars that just decide to go straight down New Street. Well, if it's a dead end at that end of New Street, they go right along, they take a right onto Chestnut. Passenger cars aren't inconvenienced at all, they're happy. People that are going to be inconvenienced are the trucks that can't make that right-hand turn. Problem solved there, but I don't know from the engineers, you know, or the town's legal right to do that. The issue with Jake brakes, that's because they're going too fast. The question I have to the chief is, for the one truck that they had to stop on Parker or wherever it is, how did it get so far away from them? Was he going too fast, or was he trying to ignore them?
They currently had 3 trucks stopped at the time, and as he went by, they couldn't wave him over.
I just didn't know if he was speeding or if he was just.
That truck was listing heavily to one side, and they wanted to.
My concern is I have 2 small children. I don't think they can stop. I think the speed that they come down in front of Moynihan's and gather that speed, they can't stop. And I don't know what reaction I'd have right now today or tomorrow or the next day if my son or daughter are hit by one of those trucks that can't stop. I don't know what I would plead to you. I don't know what I would say on but I know that I wouldn't be happy. And I'm just at a loss, because I think that there's something, raised sidewalks, they exist in Lexington, and they exist in other towns. It's a thought to consider. I understand throwing the trucks in front of Ryers isn't a good idea. My answer is, most of them, Moynihan's fine as a location, they're a business in town, they're good neighbors to us. I think as we are, I try to support them, good neighbors to them. The truck shouldn't be coming down 62 from Wilmington to get to us. They're just avoiding 93 and the state police that they don't want to see.
And on Chestnut Street, how about all the water main breaks from all these trucks that are overloaded? There's been a lot of water main breaks, especially down towards the Monahan, where all that new section was put in. I think that broke like 4 times last year. What's that cost to the town as well?
I think that, I don't think there's anyone here on the board that isn't concerned or compassionate about the issue. Is that resolving it, or, you know, preventing trucks from that street, or even during certain periods of time, is not something we can mandate by board action here. What we can do is, you know, try to find a pathway to approach it in a legal manner, you know, whether it's in part supporting the chief in his requests, or, you know, spending some money on for engineer to come in and do counts and things like that, and see, in fact, if we, you know, meet the requirements of a restriction. You know,
Counts have been done before.
I'm sorry, I got a little nervous.
yeah, that's okay.
I left before. I was told that there was a study done.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering what the results of that study were, because I was told it was done in 2007 or 2008. And I'd like just an answer to, I understand that there's a long, in-depth process to get an exclusion. And I'd rather fight for the entire exclusion, just like this road out in front of us has an exclusion. There's a sign at the end of that street, when I turned onto it, says no trucks. So I'm willing to take the full no trucks anytime, anywhere. And then if the trucking companies or the state want to say, you know, hey, let's negotiate, and we want to negotiate back down to a 7 to 7, fine. Let's take the full, and I'll accept the half. And then I'd like to, if all this process, what does it take to close the end of New Street? What does it take to put in, because that we don't have to ask the state for, as far as I'm understood.
Mike?
Mike wants to respond.
Thank you.
Just in answer to Mr. Ladd, by redirecting all the truck traffic up Chestnut Street, I would anticipate some significant geometric changes to the intersection of Haverhill and Chestnut.
Right. You couldn't make a turn there. And it's right in the midst of school, you know. I suspect that maybe the restriction on this road goes back to when it was a elementary school here. Yeah. I don't know what process is long.
What's the problem with them using Route 28 and the state highways that are made for it?
Well, I think that's what they should be doing, but I don't know how to, force them to do that.
To that place.
Michael?
Well, the problem now is we can't, right now, we can't exclude them,
No, it's okay.
right now. There's certain things that we need to do.
Yeah, but why, only because I didn't really understand his answer. We block off New Street, yes, for the week, you know, it took the trucks less than 5 hours, as the state police mentioned, to not come down there anymore, because they got the word that the state police are there. It would take them but a couple of days to figure out, as a group, you can't go down there anymore. There's Jersey barriers at the end of New Street. You can't cut through there. And now they'll go back to doing what they used to do way back when, take 28 and take 93. And
What,
I mean, this, guys, I mean, gentlemen, these are big trucks. All right, these are very big trucks, and they belong on big roads. The businesses in Wilmington belong on 93 and 95. They're cutting through our town to get around the rotary, to save a few bucks in a half an hour of time. I have to drive on these roads. I have to sit in traffic. They have to sit in traffic too. We can't always have what we want. But basically, they're coming through our town, from Wilmington, all those businesses, to avoid the highways, where they belong. The annex, when they came to town and they filed a business permit, you know, with the planning commission, did they say they were gonna run all their trucks through our neighborhood and down New Street? I doubt it. But that's where they're all running. And I just think that, you know, we've been hoodwinked by the annex, and the big businesses in Wilmington belong on big roads and not through our neighborhoods.
I agree, just getting the solution to get to that point. I think we're all in agreement.
So what's the fastest way to get there?
Well, we've got to do a little work to determine what that is.
I don't work anymore right now for the summer, Italian.
Mr. Prisco.
Like Mr. Messeri said earlier, I'm certain this board absolutely supports what you're saying and what you're trying to accomplish. And we're never going to solve it all here tonight. But there is a traffic mitigation action plan that the chief had provided us in our packages, which I'm not sure everyone has received it. I did drop off a copy to Mr. Foss because I think it's an excellent document. I was extremely pleased with what I read. And what I'd like to suggest for the sake of progress is, if the chief doesn't mind, and I don't want to put you on the spot and don't feel like you have to answer it right now, but it'd probably be best if we try to continue what we're doing here in a realistic manner, maybe in the police station, in your forum, invite the town engineer, invite whoever you feel is necessary to take your mitigation plan and work with the community. And I'm assuming from what we do here, we'll follow to other areas in town that probably run into the same problems. I'm not sure how you feel about that, Chief, but I think you guys did a phenomenal job here, and I think you have something great to work with. And it will give you an opportunity maybe to present it to these people in an environment in your place. In Officer Tilton, maybe you could provide some more of the details that associate what you came up with, why you came up with some of the stuff in there. It makes sense to me.
To respond to Mr. Prisco, it's certainly the mission of the North Reading Police Department to keep the residents in our community and those who travel through it safe. That's one of our primary goals. And when we look at this action plan, we look at this as the immediate steps that can be taken. As we look at the larger picture, just picking up some tidbits from Mike Sorig, and as we go to look at routes, alternate routes to, the first step is we're going to do an engineering study on traffic counts to determine if we reach that threshold of 5 to 8% of heavy commercial vehicles. And then we'll work with the DPW looking at alternate routes, but those alternate routes, there may be significant engineering changes that have to be done to certain intersections, so that, like, as Nathan was saying, they don't have to go from the left-hand lane to take a right-hand turn. And so those are the things that'll have to be looked at very carefully, and that will be the long-term plan. I feel fairly confident that in the short term, if we do an aggressive selective enforcement program, as was outlined, that may get the message out to some of the truckers to slow down, or they're going to be stopped. They do communicate with each other, as was found out through why the state police start so early in the morning. And then we'll continue to work on that longer term action out of that plan.
There was, I have a question. I don't know if anyone can answer it.
Mr.
Was the proposal to close New Street, or the suggestion to close New Street off? Is that
Wait,
doable?
Mr. Wheeler. I see your hand, Mr. Wheeler. Let Mr. Delaney finish.
Is that doable, and how can it be done? And Mike, if you can't answer tonight, you can't answer, but I think it's a fair enough question.
Yeah, well, I don't have an answer whether or not, you know, legally,
Sure.
it can be done, but what I was trying to explain with that action, there's another reaction. If you redirected traffic to the intersection of Chestnut and Haverhill, we'd be forced to gonna say reconstruct a portion.
I
of the
understand that intersection. I think what you would force, though, you'd force them down 62, though, because I don't think they'd
Right.
want to take that turn coming from Chestnut onto Haverhill Street.
But it brings them back down into that Ria section.
But it brings, but the,
Which is difficult to make a turn there too, so.
but there is a traffic light there.
Oh, yeah.
It's gonna slow them down versus coming up Chestnut Street where there's no traffic light. There's not even a blinking light at that point, and they just continue through out onto Haverhill Street by going down New Street.
I mean, maybe the solution is to make everything so difficult for them that it's easier to go down
I was just gonna say.
93.
With 2 school bus stops.
You get that on tape.
And I'm surprised that New Street's 19 feet wide. I wouldn't even have guessed it was that wide.
Yeah.
So,
Jeff had his hand up.
Yeah.
Shouldn't the town already be looking into doing the intersection over in front of Kitty's, now that Heavenly Donuts is gonna take over the old Dunkin' Donuts anyways?
It is? Heavenly?
Jeffrey,
that's state highway.
Mr. Wheeler, is that who you,
It's gonna
okay.
be a dangerous, it's gonna be an extremely dangerous.
Mr. Wheeler,
Comment
Mr. Wheeler, please.
Speed blocks. Now, when I leave the meeting tonight, are they gonna be considered, or can you just declare them dead wood?
I think at this point, right, we should leave all the options on the table and find out what we can and can't do.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, in the rear.
I'm Michael Moynihan, from Moynihan Lumber. I have a question for you, Michael. Over the years, our trucks have been bigger and heavier as business has dictated. And if you walk on New Street, I would like you to tell me how goods can get in, or could get into the lumber company, which has been there almost 50 years. Even my own trucks, as I explained to my attorneys earlier, they're 24-foot beds. They got only a 10 to 12-foot cab in front of that. Makes them 36 feet long, approximately. Trailer trucks, we have trailer trucks also. 40-foot beds, 12 feet, 52 feet long. There is no easy way that any of our vehicles can make a turn where Doc Mahoney used to live, where many accidents have occurred. Mr. Wheeler, you can attest to it, we've been neighbors a long time. If we go down to where Ryder's store is and take a left-hand turn, we have 2 options. One, to stop traffic, which would be an impediment to go over Central Street Bridge, or go down to the next intersection. Again, impeding traffic and making that long swing around and come down Chestnut Street. So, the problem is posed. You know, I see the neighbors' problems. I hope my trucks are not at fault. My guys, my truck drivers try to do the best they can. They came to me when they saw the state police team there on Friday, and they told me that, you know, the speed limit is 25 miles per hour, and they maintain that. But even me, last Friday night, when I left the lumber company, there was a young man on a motorcycle. He had to be going 45 miles an hour, right in front of the playground. That's where you should put your emphasis. If you want to stop the speeding, catch it from the beginning to where Ed used to live, not when you're throwing around the corner. I also mentioned earlier to my attorneys that maybe a way to stop the traffic from speeding might be to put a camera, like they do in other states, other unions, and catch the number plates, and not just cite them, but put a fee on them. And that includes my own. If I'm at fault, fee me. But I don't think that we're at fault as much as others. I can sit in my office window and watch them fly back all the time. So those are just options out there too. I would like to work with the town as I have for many, many years. And hopefully together we can solve the problem.
One suggestion might be just to split the difference, since there's New Street comes into Chestnut and you have Chestnut continuing. Make both of those sections one way but opposite, so you would enter in one and leave the other. That way, Moynihan truck could make that turn out, but people wouldn't be speeding through coming into it as well. Just throwing it out there.
Mr. Yule.
Yeah, hi. It's, I think we're all in agreement that there are a multitude of possible solutions that we can address and that we need to address, and I think the speed of addressing them is a big issue as well. I think with what the police are presenting is a step in that direction. I don't know, as Mike said, we're not gonna be able to come up with a solution tonight. We'd love to be able to do that. But there's a process that we have to go through, and we should start going through that quickly, so that, because this has been going on for over a year now. I know I've spoken to somebody about a year ago on this issue where it was, the concern was expressed. So I think that's where we're heading to, because we understand what you're saying. I mean, I have to deal with the corner of Park and Concord. That's a very difficult corner as well, for different reasons. And addressing an unsafe corner is important to do so, because as Mr. Laird, is that correct, stated that you don't know how he would feel if any of his children or anybody's children were hurt under these circumstances, and we've taken too much time to get it done. So, I mean, we are going in the right direction. We do need to pool all these ideas together, get them on paper, and start working in that venue, all right? And maybe we can put a group together, such as yourself, and start coming up with some ideas.
Has anybody talked to the postal annex?
Gentleman in the rear.
My name is Mike Springer, I live at 9 Cedar Street, and I think that there's been a lot of good suggestions and things like that, but a couple of things need not be overlooked. Number one is the trucks are big and they're not made for our streets. And number two, if all the trucks were going the speed limit, a lot of them would go a different way. And so I think that would cut down on the traffic a lot. And I know on Franklin Street, there's an elementary school, and they have a thing there that tells cars how fast they're going when they get to that point. And that's in Reading, I know, but still, when the trucks see that they're going 45 instead of 25, it could be a big help coming in either direction. And I know I hear sirens, and the police are doing a very good job keeping the residents are all going the right speed limit, because we have kids playing at that park and neighbors and everything like that, and walking around the streets, going to Ipswich Park for activities there and other things. And I really think the citizens of North Reading try to go the speed limit, and the ones that don't need to learn. But still, if the trucks were going the speed limit, a lot of them would go a different way because they're heavy-footed and they drive too fast. Thank you.
I've heard a number of different things, and I'm trying to get a measure of, obviously there's the safety issue. I mean, I've heard that, but I heard earlier that there's excessive noise, especially in the summertime with open windows, and also heavy exhaust fumes as a result of a high number of trucks going through your neighborhoods. It's clear that, they picked that path because they can make the turns easier. But it is a fairly narrow road. I tell you, I'm scared to hell when I drive down 62 to go up to 93 in the morning and the cement trucks are going in the opposite direction, But I think that I'd like to get a measure of, the noise issue is major concern, and the speed.
Window panes rattling.
Rattling.
Jane had her hand up.
Yes, Jane.
Jane Swart, 138 Chestnut Street. I've lived on Chestnut Street now for almost 18 years. And when I moved in, I worked full-time in Boston. I wasn't home during the day. And when I was home on maternity leave during the summer with my 2 children, I was astounded at the noise, speed, the volume of trucks. Where did they come from? I never noticed them. They're not as heavy on the weekends. Sundays are beautiful because there's no trucks on the road. It's all of it. It's the fumes, it's the noise. and they start early in the morning. And it's especially bothersome in the summertime. I had to close, and I have babies, I had to close the windows, because they were so loud.
Which is proving the point that it's not just about speeding. I want to make sure that everybody is clear on
They have
that.
to stop, they can't speed it that.
Well, I brought it up because we've seen it migrate from one
Yeah.
area to
And
another, and it's everything.
And so just to be sure that if we were to reduce the speed, that doesn't solve the problem. We are looking for the trucks to be eliminated completely to avoid the fumes, the vibrations, the noise, and the safety issues. So I wanna make sure
Gentleman,
there's no confusion around there.
Gentleman with his hat in the back there, Mr.
Not to beleaguer
Oh, yes.
continue on with the evening, if maybe it was possible to move the conversation along, taking in all these issues that run the gamut, to set up something where the chief, town engineer, I think Nate Foss has done a lot of work for all of us in keeping us all informed, but I'd be happy to put myself on the group, maybe with one of you, and then I'd like to have, you know, somebody from Moynihan involved in trying to come up with a solution that works for everybody. I don't wanna say that the reason Moynihan's trucks come up up Haverhill Street from 128 is because the length of time it takes them to get all the way down to 93, come up 93, and come over 62, if that's where most of your trucks are coming from, I don't know. My point is, I don't know, and I don't wanna make his business suffer, but at the same time, we need to see if we can come up with a solution that works for all of us and can either eliminate the trucks completely, or so that in the summertime, I don't have to smell what it smells like when it's paved road, because the paving trucks come by me so often with the hot pavement. All of those aspects, you know, we can form a group and move it along. I think we can end tonight and move to the next step of where are we gonna go and how can we keep everybody informed and moving. And I think we as a group would appreciate that it's not gonna take another year to get there, and that we can just find out where the next steps are and be informed as to how we're getting there.
Mr. Prisco.
Just two questions. Is there a law against weight restrictions on roads?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And is that the same process? We can't just arbitrarily go and do it as a town?
I got a direct question to one of the police officers. There are
weight restrictions, and I believe it's tied into the trucks.
Right.
The size of the trucks. And the way it was explained to me this evening as we were preparing to come here, for example, we'll use the example of the hot top trucks. When they go in, they know the size of the truck and the capacity. They can carry 40,000 pounds, for example. They'll dump to 40,000 pounds in there, but on occasion you have some companies that are pushing to get jobs done quicker, so rather than having a truck making 2 trips, they'll say, you know, give us a load and a half. And so some companies will comply with that, so they become overweight. The problem with the NRPD determining the weight, we haven't got the capacity of tools to do it. That's something that I would have to propose in next year's budget to get the equipment to do that, or perhaps seek some kind of a public safety grant, if there's anything out there to do that. The state police have the capacity to come in and stop the trucks and determine their weight. But the problem, as I mentioned earlier, is scheduling them here on a frequent enough basis to make a meaningful impact that would force drivers to seek alternate routes or perhaps stop that practice. What we're proposing is, in the interim, is to get our officers trained, and we'll try to attack all these peripheral problems associated with trucks, safety equipment and faulty exhausts and those kind of things there, in hopes that that sends a very clear message to that industry that they're under scrutiny in our community. And then so someday if we have the wherewithal for all get the proper equipment, then that's something that will be in our longer-term plan.
And then the second question I have was, has anybody reached out to the postal annex and Heffron in regards to this issue?
Yes.
We all have.
And they've been positive, negative, or they,
Post
Well,
office
I
boy,
can't hear you.
call.
He wants it.
No, that was my point.
Okay.
That was their answer. We can't hear you.
Gentlemen, Mr.
Just one thing, there are legal restrictions for trucks on small roads, in particular where there's bridges. So the bridge at Ipswich, Mass Highway has to inspect that every 2 years. Central Street Bridge, I'm sure also, but, you know, that bridge probably qualifies as a 20-foot span and needs to be inspected. So, I mean, I'd ask the town engineer if that bridge has been inspected and if it satisfies the weight requirements of 104,000 pounds or 52 tons, which is what's passing over that bridge. Fully loaded 18-wheel trailer dump is 52 tons. And it may not pass, I don't know, but it's traveling over that road, over that bridge every day.
Oh. I've made some notes, Jeff,
Yeah,
before I
to,
try to sum it up.
thank you. To go over the issue on the weights and alternate routes, I had a couple questions on that. The state police can enforce axle weights and gross weights and so on. A semi might have a gross weight of 80,000 pounds, that's including truck and content. Axle weights, if it's not properly weighted or loaded, okay, that can be an issue. So the police can go out there, the state police that is, can go out there with portable scales and do those measurements. I don't know if they did that on that, in that case. And they can do that at their whim. And I think that's very important, that if we're able to get ourselves into a position along with the police to do spot checks at that location when no one will know that it's being done, eventually the traffic will begin to subside, okay, I would think, with that kind of surveillance. With regard, Mike, to the alternate route, it would seem to me that 28 would be an alternate route to that intersection. Okay, and if we have an alternate route, then it would seem that the implementation of dealing with that corner, as we determine is the best way to do it, would answer that question, because we have Concord Street is also an alternate route. So it would seem, am I correct in that assessment, or?
You are. Based upon my observations, if you drive down 28 into Reading, maybe this isn't the venue to say this, but I think the town of Reading has done everything that they can do to keep trucks from taking if they're going southbound, taking a left. I know a few years back, they
Taking a left, I don't know, what do you mean?
Well, taking a left to get on to Haverhill Street or what?
Well, I'm not even, I mean, you can go down 28 to get onto 95, just like you can get on, off of 95 onto Haverhill. Okay, so you could do that. You know, I understand that they're going south to go north and all that kind of stuff, but it's an alternate route. I mean, they do have truck routes, and I would think that 28 is a state road. Should be all the traffic for 95 coming down rather than taking Haverhill. Because Haverhill is not a state road, is that correct?
That's correct.
It's just North Reading and North Reading. So,
I agree with you 100%, Selectman Yo. It's just the method we take to redirect traffic from Benevento, Heffron, the postal annex, down 28.
yeah. I had another question and just slipped my mind. I'll have to let it go. Okay.
I guess that I've been listening to all of this and listening to the various issues. The things that I think we should be taking some action on, and we'll have to allow our instructor administration to begin to take some of these steps and come back to us and report, is, the chief has outlined his plan. I think it's a good plan. He's looking for some resources to get his offices trained. We should ask our CPC and town engineer to, and maybe our safety officer to look into weight restriction rules. I think we should pay for a vehicle count of both vehicles and trucks so that we know whether or not we have a case to pursue a restriction in a time frame. I think we should, ask the CPC to take a look at the various intersections and alternate routes that might be available, just so we have all this information at hand. I think it would behoove us to have a discussion with the post office, formal, maybe a letter from the board. With respect to Heffron and Benevento, the way I look at it is the cement trucks are under their control, and therefore we should have a discussion with them. People picking up aggregate and blacktop, in general, are all kinds of contractors from everywhere, so chasing them down is going to be difficult. Right? I mean, the onus is more on the people picking it up. But, I think we should get the word out on at least those two, the post office and the cement trucks, because those are their own trucks. Right? And any other trucks that belong to those corporations that are going through, and we'll send a letter out and, raise our concern about what's going on there. Let's put kind of a time frame on consolidating this information and, construct a plan. Because right now I think, we got a bunch of ideas, we've got a bunch of concerns, and we need some additional information to put together a plan.
If I may?
To deal with the issue. I think it's important that this is dealt with. I frankly did not realize the extent of the issue.
Did I? Nope.
And I will make it a point to spend a little time down in that area for my own education. Yes, Mr. Yule.
Just something on behalf of Monahans who could be impacted by this action. I'd like us to keep that into consideration. I don't know how many trucks go in and out of Monahans. I would assume it's, with what we're talking about, is not the big number of the whole of the total. So there might be, how you can't go down the street unless you live there, those types of things. Well, we might be able to make an exception for Monahans. It's something, in that issue, because now you're talking, instead of 40 trucks, you're talking 3 trucks.
They're not our issue.
I didn't think so, yeah. But
And Moynihan is here because of this discussion, and I personally called and asked that someone from Moynihan be here.
The company's great, that's why we're actually looking for the 7 to 7 first, because he doesn't open until 7.
No, I asked them to come here not because there was a complaint filed against them. In fact, what I had heard was they were not the issue. I asked them to come here because, they have trucks, and we're having a discussion on what to do with the road, and they may have some ideas too.
I was curious, I wanted to ask the chief, this study that you did on the 16th, if you, what do you call that, averaged it out, would we, thank you, would we meet that 5 to 8% that the state requires?
You got a sample of one day, Jack.
No, I understand that, but I mean, if you extract, yeah, that's what I mean. It seems to me a huge number, that's why I asked that.
Well, you may not like the answer when you look at it, so
Yeah.
that's why I think it's just too small of a number to analyze it.
No, I understand that.
Yes, Mr.
In the petition and what I've heard tonight, some of you were asking for a 12-hour exclusion. I'm not clear as to what 12-hour time period you're looking for the exclusion.
7 p.m. to 7 a.m.
7, yeah, or 8 to
7
8.
p.m. to 7 a.m.?
Yeah.
See, now that's,
But I'm still concerned about the kids during the day and the safety.
right.
Well, that's why I asked,
Right.
because I was confused as to whether or not it was.
Well, that's why I had,
To answer your question, I think it's, you've got a small smattering of who actually could get time off tonight to come discuss it with you. But out of the whole group, we're not unified. We just know it's a big problem. There's a lot of different issues that bother all of us, from the noise to the smell to the danger to everything that goes into this that we've discussed. So are we all in agreement in exactly how it should be solved? No, but we're all in agreement
Something
that
has
it's
to
a
be done.
problem, and it's the trucks.
Well-
And I think what Nate has gotten is you to see that this community all agrees that there's trucks and they're a problem. Some believe that safety is the biggest issue, some believe that the noise is the biggest issue, some believe that the health is the biggest issue. You know, for Moynihan, the reason he's here is because somebody like me is gonna stand up and say, close off New Street, and he's not here, and suddenly we say, yeah, let's do it, and now his whole business is impacted.
Understood.
For him to maybe find out for us at the same time is, what would it take for Moynihan, what would it cost to his business if they did have to come up 28 or come up 93 as opposed to coming up Havel Street to make that turn in front of Ryers to swing around as opposed to be able to make that turn. Him bringing that to the table and saying, geez, this isn't the cost of my business and this is what it is, it will be helpful, but at the same time, our goal is not to eliminate Moynihan, it's to eliminate
Understood.
everybody else that's using that as a pass-through. And a note to aggregate or to any of the others, that's like, you know, saying, hey, could you please possibly do it someplace else? No, and they'll still ignore us.
To that issue, well, I guess in terms of exclusion issue, we need to know what time period in order to do the study
24
properly.
hours.
Okay.
If the state says you can't do 24 hours and we have to drop back to 7 to 7, great, but we want an exclusion, 24 hours, just like this street has.
Mike?
The state will consider a 24-hour
Okay.
exclusion.
Right.
The petition notes at 12.
Right, that's what I was picking up on and what I was heard tonight. So I don't have a problem going for a 24-hour exclusion, but we got Monahan we have to consider too. Sitting over here, who's a good neighbor.
Sir, Rita Mullen.
You know, 163 Chestnut Street, 36 years, one Chestnut Street, 36 years. I have a suggestion. If the state did such a good job in that short period of time, could the selectmen tonight authorize the police in the next 2 weeks, a little bit extra overtime, and let them sit there in the morning, pay attention to it, and if you find that it's just what you said, we're gonna call the UPS, we're gonna call whoever the people are that are breaking the law, go after them, because to be honest with you, if you try closing Chestnut Street, on New Street, you're gonna do like, just like you had when the gentleman didn't want the street open by the high school. And then somebody on Lowell Street's gonna say, well, they're coming my way, and somebody on Southwood Road's gonna say, they're coming my way. So you're just gonna keep moving the problem around. If you start tagging them, and then you know, the police department will make get the fines, the money goes back in, then you can afford to put the overtime back on to stop them from doing it. I know in Moynihan's, as soon as a truck driver ever gets any type of violation, you know, Mr. Moynihan makes sure they understand it's not gonna happen again, and it doesn't. The manager makes sure it's not gonna happen again, and it doesn't. So obviously, you've got other people in town that drive trucks, that they're not as serious about it as they should be. So if you start attacking them with possibly possible, then eventually you'll stop doing it.
The gentleman in the back that has his hand up.
I think I can speak for all the neighbors and say that our neighbors, our real neighbors in business include Moynihan Lumber, our fine service people at the DPW, and there's a Reading Light Annex with trucks that come in and out of our neighborhood. Those do not constitute through trucking. Those businesses have business, long-time businesses in our neighborhood. They're not the violators. So I think I can speak for everybody here and say, we don't have any issues with them. Do they present truck volume? Yes. Are they abusing our neighborhood? No. They're neighbors, and they've been there for a long time. And you know, but it's really the through trucking. It's the postal annex, and it's the heavy industries on Route 62 in Wilmington. Aggregate industries should be added to that list. Heffron, Benevento, and there's a few asphalt plants over there. But it's really about through trucking when we talk about an exclusion, not about our neighbors.
Well,
Yes.
I know 4 or 5 police officers here, and they probably know better than me, but hearing Heffron, Benevento, Aggregate, all out on 62, you probably thought about this, but doing enforcement on 62 on Lowell Road. And maybe they get the hint that we don't want them over here. And they start going out to 93.
Majority of the violators were coming into North Reading from the other street.
Coming in, not heading out.
Has anyone noticed whether the flow is one way or the other, or is it balanced?
It's pretty balanced both ways.
Yeah, I feel like it's balanced.
Is balanced? Okay.
Coming and going.
Probably just time of
It
day.
seems when they're coming in, we call it inbound.
Yep.
They've been empty.
So they're,
Going outbound, they're carrying the loads. So that's the general consensus we can find.
okay.
And at nighttime, it's gas trucks, 40-foot gas trucks, tankers, because they can't go through Everett anymore, going down 93, they can't go over the bridge into Charlestown anymore. They have to come in through North Reading, down at 128,
Down one.
down
And
Route 1,
one.
and they have to go in the back way through Chelsea. They won't let them go over that bridge anymore because they're too heavy. They're too heavy for that bridge, too heavy for our bridge.
When you say at night, these tankers,
I
what
see them.
time frames typically?
It's all night long, I mean.
Well, all
I'm not
night,
gonna
I mean,
lie,
what
I
is,
get home at 2 o'clock in the morning, I see them at 2 o'clock in the morning when I'm coming up.
why wouldn't they just go down 93 onto
They
128?
come from New Hampshire, they all have New Hampshire plates on them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're going down to Revere to,
Yeah, they're gonna get gas, they're gonna come right back through our neighborhood.
Revere
go
and
home.
Chelsea to fill their tanks, yeah. Well, why have they decided to cut through here?
They can't go over the Charlestown Bridge anymore, it traps.
No, I understand,
No, why
but
not
they,
just stay on 93 and go to 128?
yeah.
Instead of cutting through.
It's the thing, you love my neighborhood.
Yeah, I know.
It's a free for all. Yeah, it's just like,
Don't
trains
know.
go by constantly.
Oh, well, okay. All right, I guess the board will expect some input through the town administrator from the chief as to what his resources, you know, what he needs for resources, and to at least get that done. Yes, Mr.
What I'd like
Belkins?
to do is, it was an excellent suggestion made about a working committee, and I think it's vital at this point to make sure that any meetings that we have include the people that are here and representatives of the groups that are here, so that's the direction we're going.
How do we get the mitigation plan out to the residents so they can at least read it? Is it something they can just get online, or?
You put it on the website.
We'll put it on the website tomorrow.
On the town website, not the police website?
If the chief can put it on the police website, all the better.
That may be a bit more complicated than putting it in the town.
Forward it to me.
Our webmaster is-
Forward it to me, and I'll put it on the Board of Selectmen section of the town website.
People want it, right? You do want it?
Yes, thank
I
you.
would just
All right,
like
so,
to make a suggestion to the board that, when you put the traffic mitigation plan on, you'll eliminate Haverhill, New and Chestnut Street and make it town-wide, so we don't end up with, other concerned residents coming in. That would be part of
Sure.
our action plan to make sure that our enforcement is fair and balanced.
we'll allow you to adjust the plan, send a PDF to the town administrator, and he will put it on the Board of Selectmen section of the town website. Everyone know the address of the town website?
That include the state police reports?
Yeah, we can, that's not an issue.
Thanks, chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
I think you got our attention,
Yes.
and we'll do our best to find some form of resolution. Obviously, we have some restrictions as to what we can do and can't do.
Okay, you want?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Listen, I only need one page.
Mr. Bill,
Same, 3 pages.
why don't we take a minute or two to let the room clear?
You look good up here.
I know, I didn't, I didn't, I was good.
He said because in Boston, they can't have.
Come sit here.
He fell the other day, so he hasn't been off the gas.
Come sit here.
He fell in the, in his little.
Mark,
Mark, how How are you?
Good. It's actually very good.
You do indeed.
Wow. Didn't talk so much, we could have been done soon.
Yeah, my Uncle Billy's not doing well.
Good evening, Rita.
Good night. Good night now. Good night.
Rita, next time don't be so talkative.
Good night.
Good to see you. Oh, no. Will you live up the Cedar Street?
All right, the next item on our agenda is an update on the water emergency. I asked that this be put on our agenda just so that we get a better understanding of where we are, what issues still lie before us. I take it that Mark is here for that purpose.
Yes. Just give you a quick timeline, which I believe you should have had in your packet. We were last before you on July 1st and asked that the board actually adopt the water conservation status that we're under now. And they delegated to us to go ahead and move forward with the measures we felt were needed to ensure the sufficient water supply. That happened on July 1st. Our tanks were down about more than 30 feet from where we like to see them at 4 a.m. And what tends to happen is the tanks fill to their highest point at 4 a.m. and then 4 to 6 a.m. or 4 to 7 a.m. most of the sprinkler systems come on, and then the tanks will actually drop from that point. So we were kind of concerned. We came forward with Dick had brought in a 10-day forecast that showed no rain and 90-degree weather. And I think for the first time in my memory that a long-range forecast, I mean, it really was spot on. We didn't get any rain until Saturday, a week after that, Thursday, so it was 9 days with no rain, and most of the days were in the 90s. We were real concerned that continued outdoor water demand was going to leave our tanks dropping and dropping. And we took the measures. We brought in, and you've seen them, the 6 message boards around town. We sent people out to post the businesses the next day, that day after you declared the emergency. We went to some of the higher residential water users and asked them to just turn your sprinklers off, did some stuff on the town website, and actually saw some recovery over that long weekend. I think as we explained to you that night, typically our weekend days in North Reading are actually our higher demand days than our weekday days, because we don't have any large water using industry. On the weekends we see that drop early in the morning, but then kind of continues to be a big demand all day long, whereas on a weekday we see a big concentrated demand in the morning, but our tanks kind of recover midday, and then people come home and we see them drop again and then fill overnight. So we actually saw the tanks recover pretty well. And by about Wednesday, we were, of the week of the 4th, we were in relatively good condition. Second issue did come up that week. Town of Andover actually was having a similar problem to what we were having. They were seeing so much demand that their water tanks were dropping and they weren't keeping up with it. So they called around 4 o'clock on Wednesday and said they wanted to cut back on one of our interconnections from, we were taking about 900 gallons a minute through that interconnection, and they cut us back to 500 gallons a minute on Wednesday afternoon. Our tanks actually held through Wednesday into Thursday. Then Thursday afternoon they called again and said their tanks were not recovering, and they basically wanted to shut off the one interconnection for a day or so, which they actually did on Thursday afternoon. And we saw our tanks drop by Friday afternoon. Friday we made the decision to go out with the reverse 911 over the school system, and we actually got the police involved at that point to go out and start. We gave them a list of about our 100 largest users and asked them to go out and notify people that, you know, if you continue to water, there are going to be fines assessed against you. We did see our tanks drop fairly significantly Thursday into Friday. I called Andover on Friday, got them in the afternoon, and they said, look, we're going to have to stay off until Saturday morning. Tanks dropped again into Saturday morning, to the point we were almost back to where we were when we came to you to declare the water emergency. Called Andover Saturday morning, I'm sorry, and they said, yeah, we can open you back up to the 500 gallons a minute, which was part way back. It was where we were after they partially choked us off on Wednesday. And luckily that day around noontime the showers moved in. Once the showers come, our demand drops way off and the tanks pretty much filled over the next day or so.
Which says that people are still watering that.
There's some big demand out there still, yeah. Since then, we've pretty much been able to keep the tanks full. I think we have relatively good compliance, at least enough to allow us to keep the tanks where we want to see them. We have had 2 water main breaks in the last week, which was kind of scary. That was one of the other reasons we'd come to you, was our tanks are low. Now, if we have a big fire or we have a water main break, we're gonna lose a lot. We, could lose the ability to protect the town. So it's kind of odd that, summertime, I don't think there's any frost going in the ground or coming out of the ground, and we saw those 2 water main breaks. So we're gonna take some steps, actually make some digital pressure recorders so we can throw them out on the system and record the pressure like every second over a couple of days and see if there's any pressure spikes or things going on in the system.
What street were they on?
They were in 2 different locations. One was on Park Street between Damon and Gould, and the other was up here off of North Street on Euclid Park. Euclid Park has been a historic problem. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with that water main, but it breaks about every 2 years in certain locations. But again, the pressure recorder should give us a little bit better data on that. Currently, we're still taking the 500 gallons a minute from Andover. We could potentially open up to 900 gallons a minute. Even at the 500 gallons a minute rate, we're filling the tanks by midnight, and what happens when the tanks are full, the Andover interconnection starts shutting off, and then if we got even higher, our own wells would start shutting off. So by about midnight, the Andover interconnection shutting off, and it stays off till 6 or 7 in the morning when the demand starts up again. So we have some leeway in the demand, which is a good thing. Makes me sleep a lot better than I had been. And that's about where we are now. I did have just one other thing that I pulled off the Mass DEP website that I thought I'd share with you. This is their list of, actually as of July 13th, it's the current communities that have either mandatory or voluntary restrictions. The green, as they come around, you'll see the green, town shaded in green are the voluntary restrictions, and then the orange ones are the mandatory restrictions. You can see there's a big kind of a hole where Boston is. That's the MWRA communities. They're not under any kind of restrictions. But by my count on the website, there were 77 communities with some type of restriction on them. And of those 77 communities, 42 of them have been added since June 15th. So a lot of towns are under the same situation we are. It's kind of scary watching the reports on the news when the town's ability to produce water and pump water into their system through their treatment plant is being outstripped by the amount that's being used by people, and it's going on day after day after day, and you're seeing your tanks go down and down and down, incrementally down, but it's a scary thing. And it's the first time, I've been doing this for about 20-something years, and it's the first time I've ever seen that, and it's pretty widespread this summer. Obviously, we've got some heat wave issues, but like I said, I'm a lot more comfortable that the actions we took a couple weeks ago were warranted at the time and have proven since then to be the right decision to make.
Mark,
I'm sorry.
There were a couple questions that I had. One was that when we were informed that the Andover had cut back the restrictions, what I heard, I don't know whether it's true or not, was that they did not want to declare an emergency, and as a result, they solved their problem by cutting back our water supply.
Yeah, their comment was they did not want to do a mandatory water ban.
That's why it's not on here?
That's why it's not on there. By being voluntary, they didn't have to report to the state. I mean, it's not a big deal. It's a 2-page form on the DEP website. Takes about 30 seconds.
No, but maybe there are citizens that come back at them and say, we don't want, why we're selling water to North Reading, or we're doing this or that. We don't have enough water for ourselves.
Historically, Andover has not, other than if they have an issue with their treatment plant that they need to do maintenance on, and they'll call us and tell us, in 48 hours we need to shut you off.
That's different. That's a different situation.
They have never restricted us. They have called once or twice and said, look, we're getting close to the point where we may need to restrict. We just want to make sure North Reading has at least as stringent restrictions in place than we plan to put in place. This, it really came out of the blue to me, which was little.
Well, it raises a real concern for me in terms of, this is a water supply, and, if they can just flip the switch at will, No, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't. No, because the contract, the 1991 contract that exists between Andover and North Reading, I looked at. And there is language in here concerning impairment of supply, and it states that the only circumstances that Andover's not to be furnishing water to North Reading continuously is a force majeure event. And I don't believe, in my judgment, is what happened was not a force majeure event. So I think, from my perspective, we need to open up a dialogue with the town of Andover, because my view of the situation is that the situation was not, did not meet that requirement. And so we need to ensure that going forward, it doesn't arbitrarily happen and hamper the town of North Reading to the point where it creates a public safety emergency, so.
So you're gonna open up a dialogue
Yeah,
with
I
them
think
on that issue?
that's the way to do it, and so there is language in the agreement. It's interesting when you go through here, and keep in mind, this was written 20 years ago, so I can tell you that agreements written 20 years ago are much different than what they are today. It provides an upper limit of water of up to 1.5 million gallons a day, but it doesn't say anything about a minimum quantity of water that needs to be provided. And if you look at it, is for something that's as substantial as this, that I believe the amount that we pay for purchase of water is about $1.1 million a year, in excess of $1 million a year. And you figure that the value of this agreement is tens of millions of dollars, and it's probably 4 or 5 pages long. So it's probably not 100% adequate in terms of a document that we want to necessarily use going forward.
Mr. Prisco?
So there's nothing in that contract that talks about the gallons per minute?
Up to 1.5 million gallons per day.
Per day?
Correct.
Okay.
There's nothing in there saying they have to provide us with a minimum per day.
Right, well, what I'm asking is, can you even get to that with 500 gallons per minute?
No.
No.
Well, we actually, we have 2 interconnections. We have an old existing 1950s vintage interconnection on Central Street. They didn't shut that one off. That one can give us about 400 gallons a minute, and that one was on the full time. So they didn't completely shut us off. On top of that, we add about 900 gallons a minute max on Main Street. So they took, 60% of our available supply away from us. 60% of that 1.5 million gallons a day.
That's scary.
The other issue is, first of all, I commend you guys for getting the word out so quickly and the actions that were taken, but it appears that even through that, and, even after the signs are up and the messages go out, we have a number of citizens that are just ignoring the law. Right. And, I understand that, we used to be, I can remember days in summers where we were on alternate rotation, and that is, by the way, I believe is the law.
That is.
Right. However, the past, I think since I've been on the board, we haven't had a summer where it mattered, I guess, and people have forgotten.
Yeah. To be completely honest, last summer, it rained all the way through the middle of July.
Right. We didn't care.
We didn't sell enough water,
right,
to make us in the black at the end of the year.
Mhm.
So, we like to sell water. It's how we balance our budget. So do we get out there and knock on doors at 4 o'clock every morning and tell them they're on the wrong day? No, we don't. And
No, and I'm not suggesting that, it was necessary, but people of habit, right?
Exactly.
And so, I take that into account as part of the issue. We're going through a re-education. But I think there's still a number of citizens in town that are just scofflaw. And, which raises the issue of should we, as a board, reconsider the fine structure? Because the fine is pretty minimal.
Yeah.
And I guess that, some people may look at it and say, I've invested 30, 40, 50, maybe $100,000 in my landscaping, and, so I pay a few $100s on a fine. Who cares?
when the police, I believe when the police went out, and I know we sent our own crews out that same day, which was a week ago, I guess it was last Friday, no, a week ago Friday.
Yeah,
You know, that was the telltale sign of which houses to go to, who's still got the green lawn. And
Yeah, of course.
clues you in pretty quick. Our own emergency response plan to loss of source, one of the big, you know, the number one factor is, okay, demand reduction, especially if you're in the summertime. You know, you can get by on 1 million, about a little over 1 million gallons a day in the winter. Well, in the summertime, that jumps to 2.5 million gallons. That means you got 1.5 million gallons a day of discretionary water use. So first thing you got to do is get people back. We never had to go to this step, so yeah, getting the message out was probably a little longer than it should have been. Now that we've been through it, there's a lot of lessons we learned. And then enforcement is another big one. I have a guy that works for me that's been with the water department about 25 years, and he remembers the 1980s when there were total water bans, and he was kind of harping on me, you know, we got to get out there. We got to go out and start telling people. We got to go out door to door, because that's what we used to have to do in the middle of the summertime. So
I think you did a great job. I think
Yeah,
your
it
staff
is.
did a great job. I'm
I
disappointed
mean,
that
I'm
we
very
haven't
happy
got
at
the
how many people
compliance.
complied, because when we did see the, you know, I was very afraid when Andover did that we were gonna be losing our tanks over a 2-day period. So there was good compliance, so I have to be happy about that.
Should be better, though.
I think we need, as you said, look at the bylaw, whether it's an increase of fines or something.
You have to make it hurt.
Shut off. I mean, you know, that was one of the things that we had asked as to whether the town had the ability to shut off anyone who was violating. And under the existing bylaw, we don't have that authority. So although we stated it in our notice that we may, in reality, legally, the town did not have that power. And it was interesting, we did speak with council on that Friday, a week ago Friday. And council went back and looked at the DEP, Department of Environmental Protection Regulations, and it was his judgment that DEP had the right to order that, or the DEP conceivably had the right to order Andover to restore the connection. And when we ended up contacting DEP to apprise them of that, they had no knowledge of those provisions whatsoever. So it's pretty interesting that council had information that those that work and make a living in the water supply division had no knowledge of. So it's an evolving situation.
So anyway, we're clearly keeping an eye on it every day, and we're still dealing with enforcement.
We are, and in terms of suspending the ban, our view is that we really need to look at the weather situation and see a period of time where there's some sustained wet weather, and ensure that the tank levels are adequate going forward, so we won't be lifting the ban. Interestingly enough, if you looked at this map back on June 30th, there were probably just a few communities that had mandatory bans. I arrived in my hometown over the weekend to see the big orange signs in the center of town flashing water emergency, water ban. So it is pretty common now. And if you look at the map, it's interesting because you see the north and the south branches, and you've got the Ipswich River to the north, that river basin. And then you've got the communities in the Charles River Basin, the Milfords, the Medways, the Hopedales and such, which is the other stressed watershed similar to us, and those are the two.
And in the middle, you got those that run MWRA.
The MWRA are those communities that aren't necessarily in a stressed watershed basin and don't necessarily work under the tight restrictions that are North Reading and other communities do.
I just do want to know, we had, and it was real good, Theo, I'm not going to even attempt it, Cooliopolis, set us up with emergency management. We called over to Beverly Airport. They said, send 6 pickup trucks over, and you can take 6. We have 6 signs sitting here, and they let us pull those signs away that day. They did have them promised, 3 of them promised out starting tomorrow, so we pulled 3 of them and took them back today. But people that are seeing the missing sign should know that, you know.
Yeah,
the
you know,
ban
it was
isn't going
curious to me as I drove into town one day and I saw a tire missing for one, and all I could think of is people stealing the wheels off. And then Greg informed me that they were purposely taken off, but.
So you can't steal them.
Yeah,
Drive away with them.
Someone at the garage had the good idea. These are easy to pull, and they cost
The only
about
one that I saw that
$15,000.
had 2 wheels on was in front of the police station. And that isn't talking about water either. What is that about?
Think about.
That's the pullover law?
Pullover
Pullover law,
law.
yeah.
To next
Well,
year.
again, I think the board is appreciative of the action that was taken. I think it was prudent that Greg and the water department asked us to declare emergency before the Memorial Day holiday. Otherwise, I mean, the 4th of July, I'm sorry. You know, I guess if we hadn't, we would have been in a real mess, so.
And the weather forecast doesn't look much better
No.
the rest of this week, right? Maybe a little rain potentially, but
No, I was looking, I had the radar in my office, and it looked like there were showers all around North Reading tonight, and I was watching out the window, but
There's nothing.
No.
Heard a little, but
Got dark for a minute.
nothing-
Yeah.
yeah.
no.
You got it.
It also got dark around noontime this morning. And all the
Yeah, it was
showers went to the
dark
south.
in the noontime timeframe, but it never rained here.
What does the Farmer's Almanac call for in August?
Oh, is that
No
what
wonder.
is that your weatherman there? Gr-
No, I mean, it's historically pretty good, but,
So, I think if additional measures have to be taken, if we want to look at that bylaw, or is it something we can just, do we have to change the bylaw, or do we have to
No,
just change
it's a
the
bylaw
font?
issue.
It is a bylaw
It is,
issue, okay.
we'd have to address it at October town meeting.
Okay,
And I'll be meeting with Dick and Mark to put forward some recommendations to you for your consideration.
okay.
excuse me, Bob, Mr. Chairman. I also want to see how the Water Commission could possibly play a role in this. I was going to speak to Greg to see if we can get an additional member to the Water Commission, because there's only 3 at this time that I know of. I can't tell by looking at the website because everybody's term seems to have expired, but I think,
I believe you're right, there are currently 3, and I know you must have talked to Steve Kazaza, and
yes.
he was mentioning having a meeting early in August to discuss water conservation.
Are you
measures.
requesting that we post an ad?
Yes, and I think we did that as well not too long ago, a few months ago, but I don't think you got a reply on that. But I think doing that again would be good. The other question I had, in some cases, the selectmen have voting privileges. It might be a good idea in this case, because we're always short on that committee, to give the selectmen a voting privilege for that committee.
Why don't we wait and see if we can attract somebody?
Yes, no, I understand that, but otherwise.
And we might have some people interested now that this has come
Yeah,
up, so.
yeah.
Okay? Thank you,
very
Mark.
much.
Thank you, Mark. Good job.
Town Administrator's report.
Good evening. Just to refer.
Welcome
to-
back, by the way.
It's nice to be back. If you could just please refer to number 9 in your packet, which is my report. We received some good news concerning a lawsuit that had been filed against the town on the Eisenhower Park eminent domain taking. You'll recall that there were a number of settlements. There was one case that did go to court. It was Palermo versus the town of North Reading. The Palermo case went to a jury trial, and there was an award of damages that was made as a result of that jury trial. And that jury award was appealed by the plaintiff, Mr. Palermo. And there was also a claim of civil rights violation. Those cases eventually ended up in the U.S. First Circuit Court of Appeals. And the First Circuit ruled that those charges would be dismissed. So that's good news. But if you do look at the letter that is from our attorney, special counsel, Brody Hardoon, you'll see that there is yet an opportunity to further appeal this thing all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And frankly, I would not be surprised if that's where it went. And it just shows you our system, and we will obviously engage counsel to defend us if it gets to that. But at least at this point, it appears as though we've got some positive news out of the entire situation.
The other news that we did receive on the legal front was the decision from the ABCC, the Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, dated July 9th, and it does support the majority of the board that voted to deny a beer and wine license to Gatherings Incorporated, doing business as a Center Cafe. And you'll note that the ABCC decision and the cover letter that's been provided by counsel upheld the board's findings of fact as they related to traffic safety and parking concerns. And this decision, as you know, can be appealed to Superior Court within 30 days, so.
And the 30-day date is from when?
From the 9th of July.
From the 9th.
Yes. Next on the list is, at the board's meeting 2 weeks ago, you did meet with RMLD, and there was some concerns expressed by the board members concerning poll locations along Route 62, and double poles that are located at various areas throughout town. The first letter concerning the Route 62 pole locations indicates that at the time the poles were being installed, that any pole locations that were in conflict were resolved by the Mass Highway Department, or Mass Department of Transportation is their current name, with input from the DPW, and that the final pole locations had been agreed and accommodated in accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act. Interesting, you read a proclamation about it being in place for 20 years. But the key point in the letter, as you'll see, is that RMLD does not believe that they have any financial responsibility for further locating those poles, so that if there is a desire by the town for specific pole locations, and I would suggest it might be specific, that we contact RMLD and they will put together an estimate for us. However, the cost of doing so will be the town's responsibility or the state's responsibility, but it will not be RMLD's responsibility. The other letter that was received was concerning double poles, and you'll see that there's about 116 poles in town. The letter goes on to state that the poles can only be removed when all the utilities have been transferred, and you see on the list which utilities haven't been transferred. Those that are attributable to the municipal fire alarm system, I will speak with the fire chief concerning an action plan. The others, we will speak to our contacts at Verizon and with the cable TV company to see if they can provide us with a time frame for relocation of those utilities, and then at the end, the last is Verizon. Next is just a reminder concerning the October town meeting. The warrant does close on August 16th, and all departments, boards, and committees have been notified of this deadline. It should be also noted that any petition article needs to be received by the town clerk on this date. The board should begin to look at the calendar about possible signing dates. We're looking tentatively at September 7th, and that will allow sufficient opportunity to print and mail the warrant to residents as provided in the bylaws. But what I will do is provide you with a calendar including hearing dates for consideration at your next meeting.
The 7th is a Tuesday?
It is.
The day after Memorial Day, yeah.
And then the only other thing that is that I'd like an opportunity to meet with the board this evening for an executive session concerning collective bargaining strategy.
Okay. Mr. Prisco?
Greg, just not to be picky, but the ABCC letter, you have down the July 9th, but the letter says July 7th, unless I'm reading it wrong. Which means it would be August 6th, not August. I believe the attorney wrote in the letter August 9th, but I have it down as August 6th. So if you go to the back page, you read, dated in Boston, Massachusetts, this 7th day of July 2010. You have the right to appeal this decision to the Supreme Court, Chapter 30, within 30 days of receipt of the decision. So.
Right, because they account for 2 days for mailing.
Okay.
So.
Is that why?
Yeah.
That's why I did the 9th.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, old and new business. Michael, you want to start?
Just old business, on the charter, getting back to the charter, I know it wasn't on the agenda tonight, and that's okay, but I'd like us to continue to keep moving forward on that. And at the last meeting, I thought we all took an action, that we were all gonna go back and review the charter and then come with a list of items that you would consider. I had presented a list, and I know there's, been a little, maybe some people misunderstood some of my comments and all, but they're just a list of ideas. They're not direction, they're not, matter of facts. It's just a list of ideas. So if I misunderstood the action that we took at the last meeting, then please correct me, but I thought we had taken that action at the last meeting. And if we did, you all have them, I'd like you to turn them into me, and I'll try to populate them if you want, all into one list. Whatever you want me to do.
I haven't had the opportunity to go through the list on my own. I did mention a couple of things that I'm interested in changing. So, I think it's because it's hot.
No, I understand.
And I actually have had a few very busy weeks with clients, which is a good thing, I guess. I will try to get my comments to you, because I think pulling them together is probably a good idea.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I've gone through it, I have some.
I'll try to get them to you in the next 2 weeks.
Okay, that's great.
Or anyone else.
Yeah, I've gone through it, and I have ideas too, so I'll
Great.
send them to you.
Excellent.
I'm on the same page. I saw it wasn't on the minutes, so I didn't come prepared in that sense, but yeah, I looked at them as well and come up with some ideas as well.
We can work, I guess, we can work it without having it on the agenda. I assume we can continue to do that, right? Until we get to a point where we may want to present it. And then I believe it has to be a warrant article that we have to have prepared by.
Well, the object of collecting and consolidating something for discussion at a meeting, that would be on the discussion would be on the agenda.
Right.
But
We can go ahead and continue to work it, though.
But we can't discuss it.
No?
No.
I just,
Send you some information.
To
just
go
our
at
thoughts.
everybody's inputs and get it
That's it.
ready for discussion at a meeting is fine with me.
good. And then the last thing I had for old business was the strategic planning stuff. Are we going to schedule another time to just focus several hours towards that down the road?
I think that your suggestion to me, and Craig was gonna give those
He did.
documents. You have
did.
them, okay.
And we'll work that, but do we
Right.
want to tonight get something on the schedule, or wait till Steve comes back to?
Oh, first of all, I wanna wait for Steve, and
Okay.
second, is I think I'd like to see this consolidation
Great.
available in draft form for discussion. That should be our next step.
Great, we'll bang that out pretty soon. And the last thing for new business, I just want to thank those that have been abiding by the water ban. We know and understand how frustrating it is, especially for those of you that have spent a lot of money on your landscape. We definitely have an appreciation for it, and we thank you for standing by us and continue to obey the ban. It is important for the town, especially from a safety perspective. That's it.
Okay, Michael? Sean?
Yes, I'll just pick up where Michael left off on the water ban. It's still, as you know, it's still in effect. It is to avoid a public health and a public safety issue, so I strongly urge those that have not been in compliance, like your neighbors have been, to come in compliance so we can avoid any public health or public safety issue. Also, in terms of old business, I know the last meeting we reviewed, or started to review, town-owned land. And what was discussed was a policy, apparently, that the selectmen's policy, that we're only to review proposals to purchase on an annual basis. I'd like for that to be on the agenda for the next meeting, for us to review and possibly discuss changing that, so the policy can be amended to something to the effect that we can address those as they are presented to the town, so we can deal with it on a timely basis.
Do you make a note to make sure it's on our agenda next time, Greg?
And I don't know if there's been any workings, or, I know, Greg, you've been on vacation, but in terms of getting further input from other the committees and boards regarding their interest or lack thereof, it seems to be year after year, it's the same. And I know, I did get a call from someone from LUC saying that they had, at one point in time, done a study of town-owned land, and they have a document, I believe it's in existence somewhere, that sets forth their, I guess, priority list. I haven't seen it, but a message was left to me, and I haven't had a chance to call the person back.
And who called? Was it, Ken?
I'll talk to you after.
Okay.
So I'd like to move forward with that, because I think there's some revenue we can gain from disposing of town-owned land, as well as getting it back on the tax rolls. I think we should really push that. That's all I have this evening.
Jeffrey?
Yes, reiterating the water policy in the town, follow with what Mike was saying, we appreciate the town members who have made it a point to conserve water, but we need more help, and we need to try to continue to conserve water as much as we possibly can. We're still in July, 1/3 the way through, and we still have all of August to be concerned about, and we don't know how that's going to pan out for us. Also, on old business, I'm looking forward to having our strategy meetings again, so that we can kind of crank up the engine and get things going in areas that we want to go. But other than that, that's it.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Following up on the water situation, but looking, and this is kind of an appeal to those citizens that have been watering even during the ban. You know, I just wish you'd think a little bit about your fellow citizens and the fact that you know, if we're all working together to mitigate this issue, then perhaps we can move forward to make some adjustments in the total ban. But we need the full cooperation of everybody to do so. Second thing is, and this is a disaster of extraordinary proportion that occurred in our adjacent town of Linfield regarding the 2 twin girls that drowned in the swimming pool. I'd just like to remind everybody that has swimming pools in town that no matter what kinds of precautions are taken, an accident of that proportion could happen here too. So it just serves as a reminder to everybody that one is that everyone should be conforming to the regulations associated with swimming pools, and that goes with fencing and all of the things that are best practices associated with it. And it's just kind of something that we don't need to happen here in North Reading. I'd like to thank the police department for their efforts in taking a little leadership on the issue over at Chestnut Street and the adjoining streets, and also members of the water department and our director of public works for taking action, Mr. Balakonis, in dealing with the water emergency. And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment to executive session for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining strategy.
Mr. Chairman, I move to enter into executive session for the purpose of collective bargaining, and further the Board of Selectmen will return to open session for the sole purpose of adjournment.
That should have been collective bargaining strategy.
Strategy.
Can I add that?
Thank you.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Prisco, seconded by Mr. Delaney. Mr. Prisco?
Aye.
Mr. Delaney?
Aye.
Mr. Yule?
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you.